Hello and welcome to KennyRoy.com. I'm Kenny Roy. This is the AnimGym webcast. You guys know what's the deal. You know what's the deal. The AnimGym is a great place for you to exercise your animation skills. 48 to 72 frames every single month. Every single KennyRoy.com member gets a crit. That's the deal. It's that simple. Let's just jump right into it. We got a few to get through today. Now remember, if you do not see your AnimGym entry critiqued, it's because you sent it in and didn't get a response from me. A response, not a respond. Responsible. Yeah, so I respond to absolutely every single person that sends in a AnimGym entry, and I say, hey, this is received, good job, or something of the sort, okay? So remember, I'm also watching these for the first time when I watch them here, so I can get that gut reaction, because your audience is only going to have one chance normally, unless they really like the movie and they see it, you know, a lot of times. You're normally only going to get one chance to communicate to your audience what you're trying to do. So I like to get my gut reaction on camera. Okay, so here, let's go with the first one. The topic this month is Oh Snap. And it's the idea was to get a character who's physically pulling on something and then it breaks, and to get that body reaction. Let's see what we have here. Ooh, interesting. Okay, so very, very, very good. Du Quang Dong always does great work. This guy's improving very quickly. So great job. I would say that to focus more on the moment when weight or physical dynamic changes with all of your exercises. What does that mean? It means when the object snaps and your character has like fully committed their weight, leaned one way, or pulling with all of their might, or I'm not sure, like depending on what the physical setup is, focusing your animation, the majority of the shot on this character changing and reacting and having to deal with, you know, being off balance or falling over or rolling or whatever it is. That was the real challenge of this shot. Okay, that's what you should really focus on. So when I see you having the character basically climb up here, and there is a little bit of a lack of physical dynamic because the hands are literally not changing. You're showing a lot of tension, which is good, and the poses are super interesting. I mean, you're starting off very strong with this pose, and both of those pulling poses when he's up on the wall also are very, very cool. But then it just snaps, and from this point, he kind of unrealistically like embeds in the ground, and his legs need to have gone a lot further over to the left here. He's got enough momentum that his legs should definitely have gone, at least over this far. And I'm not sure about embedding his head, but if that's the choice you wanted to make, just look how as he flies off, there's all of this right to left momentum that just stops, presumably because his body is so stiff that like it just gets embedded almost like an arrow into the ground. So the real meat of this shot needs to have been that change, the change in physical dynamic, and this is for everybody. This is a tip for everybody. You're be on the lookout for what a shot was like put on earth to teach you. And if I'm not mistaken, I wrote this in the forums. I'm actually not positive, so I'm going to check right now. But always be on the lookout for what the shot is going to teach you. Okay, so I wrote this. Animate a character pulling on something that is stuck, then suddenly snaps or breaks, sending the character flying. It could be, paraphrasing here, it could be as small as a stumble, or someone playing tug of war, and the rope breaks, and they do a backflip. And then here's my quote: "The size of the motion is up to you, but remember, each AnimGym shot can teach you something." So the transition in body mechanics, weight, etc. is very detailed in a shot like this. Focus on getting it right. So I gave you guys a hint as to what was the thing that this shot was going to challenge and really, really test you at. And it's the transition. It's going from that tension to that break and that release. Okay, so I would just say to this animator, really try to focus on the challenging part, which is what happens to him after it breaks. All right, not necessarily here, because if you're going to be honest, was it really that super challenging to have his hands like literally not moving at all? I mean, they're absolutely not moving. Okay. So that would be to just improve everything before the snap. That would be my main note, would be to, the hands should be moving anyway. Like when he takes a step forward, like the hands, like they should rotate on the pole, like as he's moving forward and rotate back and off there. The hands should slide and sort of adjust and readjust as often as the feet do on the ground in a similar shot. And then these toes are a little bit bent and a little bit twinned for my liking, and it doesn't make as much sense. I don't like really symmetrical poses, but it doesn't make as much sense that one leg would be that far up and would be such a different pose than the other leg as well. Overall, very good, and I can see that you're improving. Focus more on the transition and get more body mechanics shifts into your shots. Okay, cool, man. All right, so that was Di Quang Dong. I'm always terrified when I realize I'm about to say his name out loud. Because I don't know if that's how you say it. So I apologize to you if I messed that up. Okay, here we go. John Tilson. Let's see John's work here. Oh, cool. All right, John. Cool. So we got a character who's fishing, it seems, and they lose their balance somehow. Is that a dead pixel in my monitor? Oh man, that stinks. Okay. All right. So here's the dealio with this. You've chosen a composition where we're staring almost like directly at the character, which means that foreshortening is going to release or remove a lot of the stuff that you're doing in perspective, right? It's just going to. So when it first like pops right here, it looks more like he's jumping upwards. And then the fact that he flies backwards away from us seems like it's unmotivated. I would say that those two beats should be combined into one. And if you can, since we are staring just, we're not 100% staring down the pipe, there's a little bit of perspective that's offered from your set. So you actually expect the character to fly, backwards a little bit towards screen right and not screen left, which is what he does. He ends just slightly left of, just a breath left of where he started, which is actually straight back from camera. So if you want a straightforward composition like you have, then maybe make them move a little bit further back. One thing that's also good to remember is this is more support for the reason for the reasoning behind combining this beat with the fly backwards, is that in foreshortening, when you have foreshortening, pose changes can actually be used to emphasize the motion, right? So this is not a very interesting pose change. It's basically just scaling my hand. Even though I'm moving it the same amount that I am right here, and you're actually getting some interest and some pose change, right here, it's just like there is a hand that's just scaling up and down in composition. Not very interesting. So you have to supplement that with pose change, right? You have to do something that is creating a little bit of interest. So if you put these two things together, where he's in this tense pose, and then he pops into a big pose change, and I would say that this is a little bit understated of a pose change. I would hope he goes, into something like very, 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 pushed kind of in all directions, pops into that spread out pose. Then it would help the lack of the depth that we have on this shot. Another thing is the prop really ought to be helping you. The prop is the most elastic thing in the shot. So when the line snaps across one frame, the prop should go just absolutely just arrow straight. And then on the next frame, a very quick, maybe 2-frame transition from this pose that you have here to that popped up pose. Okay. But yeah, that fishing pole really is an opportunity to, again, communicate that snapping way better. I love the roll and the bounce, and especially strong. You deserve huge kudos for this kind of plateaued Y-arc in the air on the bounce. It really feels like you worked the energy out of that and really took your time to make that as interesting as possible, where he bounces and there's just a little bit of a hang in the air before that settle. Very strong. And I like people using flour sacks for these physical tests, man. It really is. It's a cool thing you did here. So pat yourself on the back for not going bipedal with this. Because we very rarely animate humans. If it's bipedal or a character, it's very rarely a human. It might be a human, but normally it's like a teddy bear or a whatever, some sort of like anthropomorphized animal or toy or something like that. And it's good practice to use something that's not like like Hogan or Goon or something like that. Cool. Great work, man. Welcome to the AnimGym. I don't think I've seen your work before. Apologize if I have. I don't have the best memory lately. Let's move on here. Louis Attini. We know Louis is going to be on board. Louis has become a stalwart member of the AnimGym. You know what I should do? I should come up with like a T-shirt that I send to people that have been have done the AnimGym like more than like 10 times, and it should say Gym Rat, and then like have a barbell, but the barbell is like the person's like holding it up, but the barbell is not a barbell; it's actually like a spline. I think that would be funny. Gym Rat. Anyway. All right. So Lewis, this is interesting work. I think that you should look at my cartoony animation. My cartoony animation lecture, because in it I describe how best to do a scramble, because a scramble is actually impressionistic animation. I feel like your legs are doing too much like real footfalls, and you felt a little bit too obligated to make those like feet hit the ground in a sort of realistic or conceivable way, and you didn't feel like you could do like a real scramble. Partly because those feet don't look like they're backpedaling. They look like they're actually almost taking steps forward. So the first thing is that scramble that he does needs a little bit of work. You burn a lot of shoe leather here, my bro, in this shot. It only snaps on frame 27. So if you were doing, it's 3 frames over 24. So if you were doing a 72 frame shot, then you only really have 44 or 45 frames to then do it. But then look, you did a 48 frame shot, so you only have 21 frames where you're actually dealing with what I talked about in the topic as being the most interesting part about this. So again, I'll just repeat it for everybody. When you're doing physical tests, the most interesting and the most difficult part of it, and what you should be focusing on, is always those physical transitions. It's those moments when the physical setup, the pulley and the weight, or the spring and the hammer, whatever it is. Just imagine it's like this Rube Goldberg machine or some sort of contraption that's set up. Never mind that it's bodies and like doors and tug of war ropes or whatever this is, a stick embedded in the ground. Never mind that. Just forget that it's like characters. Just imagine it's like this physical contraption. When the contraption breaks, or when the contraption changes, or when something sets off the contraption, that's the part that is the most difficult and is what we should be practicing. Okay. On this pull, this is slightly unrealistic, because what happens is he's pulling back presumably, and his weight doesn't yet even have a chance, like for longer than like maybe a frame and a half, 2 frames, to pull on this thing that's embedded before he starts moving forward again. And if you think about it, his arms are the only thing that could pull him back. And the screen right arm is maxed out. In fact, it's stretching. So what you've created here is kind of a very weak pull on this thing. I don't believe that first pull is actually very strong. Then on the second one, watch how he's pulling back even before that screen left foot plants. Again, we're kind of left to imagine that the sum total of the weight that he's putting against that thing is already set, is already at maximum even before that foot's put down. Right? Because he was able to pull and was already in the pose just as that foot gets placed down, and no pose change happens afterwards. So planting that foot doesn't actually give him any extra like oomph. What you would need to do is bring the hips closer to the hands in a pose change after that foot is planted, to show us that he's actually pulling harder and harder and harder and harder. Without pose change, we don't get that weight. Okay, and then I would say throughout is a little bit odd, how his hips are perfectly straight up and down, and it seems as though there's only rotation in his upper spine. And nothing else. So a few pose problems. I think you need to work out the spine. My guess is that you're not zeroing the spine between poses. I would do that because what it forces you to do is to rebuild your spine pose based on what's best for the frame, and not rely on how far your previous spine pose is close to the next spine pose that you have. If you have to rebuild it from scratch every time, you have to very much pay attention to what you've created in there and not rely on stuff. But still, I'm glad you're in the AnimGym. Thanks for being a good member of the gym here. David Kiofi, here we go. This is very good. It's very physical. It feels very physically accurate. It feels like at the speed and there's very little exaggeration of this, and that's fine. There's plenty of animation out there that needs to be basically right on the money in terms of like the physicality of it. Cool. It does look, though, again, like you focused mostly on pulling the thing and not the transition. Please put a frame counter so that I can refer to the correct frame when I'm critiquing this. So yeah, you had it break on frame like 43, 44, and it's 65 frames. So you ended up getting about 2 seconds of build-up, and then 20 frames of actual physicality. And since he's falling for about 10 of those frames, you really only get actually about 10 frames of real transition in the weight, right? Because the falling motion doesn't actually give you much to practice, because you just have to kind of get him realistically from standing to lying down. Let me just really quickly caveat everything I'm saying by pointing out that this is good animation. I would go so far as to say that this is on standard for some stuff that I can see going into work that we do here at the studio. So that said, I'm only ever, if it seems like I'm harping on something or being like unfairly harsh on the animation, it's because we ought to really focus on the stuff that's going to make us better the fastest when we're practicing. And so that's why this long lead up to where it breaks is kind of not as good practice. That's all I really want to say. Starting out, I'm not quite on board for him arching his back so much and then sort of like rolling his hips underneath. I would say that to keep his back just slightly bent. I understand what you're trying to do. It's what was missing from the last piece, where the character had his hands on something, but there was no pose change. His hips weren't getting closer to it, which basically what that really does is just makes it so that the axis that the legs are pressing is more aligned with the axis that the object will release. Okay, so if you get your hips right up against something, I mean, think about it. If there's a sandbag and you want to like lift it up, what are you going to do? You're going to walk right up to it and get your hands underneath it, but your hips right up against it, so that when you stand, basically that axis that your legs are pressing, are applying force is lined up with the axis that will release it, lift it straight up. If it was something like a well, let me show you. If it was something like, so that's like a sandbag, right? A sandbag just like sitting, like on a thing. You'd want your hips right here, right up against it, so your legs, when your knees go from bent, all right, to extended, look at this axis. This axis is the same axis as will release it. If it's like a crystal, bing, I don't know, embedded in a wall, then you're going to want and it's going to release this way. You still want your hips to be right up against it and lined up with, so your character is going to jump on the wall, right? And here are your hips, and they're going to try to get their feet up on the wall like this, so that when their legs extend, okay, actually probably bent over like this, so that when their legs extend and your hips go like this, and hopefully you're still holding on to this thing, it's in the same axis as we'll release it. Okay, so I understand what you're doing here. It's just him. It's almost like you thought that you needed to anticipate him moving his hips underneath this thing with a pose change in the back, and all it actually serves to do is overemphasize the pose change in the hips. This just looks a little odd. I don't know. I don't know any other word for it really. Just so much independent movement in the hips. I would also delay the foot. That foot seems like it's moving just a little too early. I would get the hips moving forward a little bit, let that foot sit on the ground, but then move it a little bit quicker. It would probably end up being placed on the ground on the same frame in the end. It was just delay it moving just a little bit. Okay, the fall is great. I love the tiny little stutter step you got in with this foreground foot. I love the hit, but maybe a little bit of sliding, so it doesn't look like his sideways, his lateral movement comes to a dead halt, or he's got glue on his butt. Super strong though. Across the board, guys, very good work this month. Thank you for being part of the AnimGym. Tell your friends. I'm always looking for more animators to participate. I think it's a great resource. I hope and that you're enjoying it and improving. I'm seeing improvement. I hope you are feeling it because it's there. Okay, I'll see you guys next month. Take care. As always, rock on.